Hello, this is David Sloan Wilson for Evolution, This View of Life, the magazine that approaches anything and everything from an evolutionary perspective. I am pleased to introduce Jiro Tanaka as the editor of the arts section of Evolution, This View of Life. Welcome, Jiro.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about how you became interested in evolution as someone who is actually very well informed in the literary and cultural studies tradition.
Well, in literary theory and literary criticism has had a long tradition of reaching out to other disciplines earlier in the, say, early to mid 20th century. And so I feel like reaching out to evolutionary theory now is completely consistent with that tradition.
Okay, great. So a little bit about your personal story as to how you encountered evolution.
Well, I did my PhD in German intellectual history and German philosophy. And so I was always a little bit on the analytical side there. But there was definitely maybe a lot of resistance in the literary academy towards definitely towards the biological end of things. And I thought that the picture that we had was incomplete, that we could include some of the insights in modern evolutionary thought without, well, maybe some of the fears about thinking in biological terms I thought were unfounded, and that that we wouldn't really lose a whole lot by considering what modern evolutionists such as yourself were saying about cultural artifacts, about especially creativity. So that's how I came to it. Certainly, there was a lot of dissatisfaction with some of what I thought had become the narrowness and provinciality of certain schools of literary thinking, in which I was deeply, trained and immersed. It came out of a bit of dissatisfaction with some of the alternatives that we had when I was coming up in graduate school, and I felt that I had taken that to its as far as I could take it. Certainly, the most of the extreme variations of postmodern literary theory, and so I was definitely looking for something that kind of rang true to me. And I also had the privilege of working when I was a visiting scholar at UCLA. I had the privilege of working in the laboratory for Alan Fiske, and it was a multidisciplinary team among the anthropologists.
Uh-huh.
And they were the laboratory was actually I was attached to the department. It was the program for human complex systems,
Hmm.
but they were a wing of anthropology. So I had I went to the Beck talks there, the colloquia that they had on evolution. Met Clark Barrick and also Rob Boyd,
Hmm.
and learned a lot from them. But in Alan Fiske's lab, we were looking specifically at something called frontotemporal dementia. It's a form of dementia, and so it had a team of psychologists, anthropologists, and also there was a neurology section too. And I'd always been interested in the brain. So there was a steep learning curve there, and I thought, and that was when I started writing more about evolution in the brain and how it would affect how we understand human creativity.
Wow, that's great. And there's growing on the other side too, because you and I know, and I hope that through Evolution, This View of Life, we'll make this an important part of the arts section, is that as evolutionists started to become interested in the arts, then there's been some growth that's been required there, and that some formulations of evolution in relation to human affairs really hasn't taken much account of culture. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that from your perspective as to the kind of diversity that exists among evolutionists who are approaching the arts, what kind of differences and what kind of controversies basically exist among the evolutionists. I don't want to make it sound as if evolutionists know the final answer and are all singing from the same page, because that simply isn't the case. So talk a little bit about the diversity of opinion amongst the things that you will be reporting upon as the arts editor.
Yeah, it really is a diverse group, as you said. I know that Joe Carroll has one take, and on certain issues he does not agree with Ted Slingerland. I think Ted Slingerland, so for anybody who's coming newly to this idea of using evolutionary theory to talk about the arts, it is not a monolithic worldview. I mean, that is sort of the stereotype. When people want to reject it out of hand, they use a couple of cliches and they say, well, it's a monolithic, reductive viewpoint that we don't want to apply to products of human culture. Or they might say, well, it's a just so story. I mean, I've heard that from my other colleagues in the humanities.
Hundreds
These
of
were some of,
times.
what's that?
Hundreds of times.
Yeah.
One of the things we're going to be encountering and dealing with again and again is this just so story uh, accusation, which is very interesting to think about. But continue.
Yeah, there are many different points of view. I think almost every different scholar I've read who is working in this area has a slightly different take on it, and it's a diversity that's very productive. It's very useful. I know that even Joe Carroll has changed his point of view compared to his writings in the 90s. He's now sort of gone over to maybe he has well, I can't speak for him, but I know that his perspective has changed because of the dialogue with people like Ellen Dissanayake and Ted Slingerland. And then there's also my old colleague and friend Francis Steen at UCLA works a lot on the notion of play in mammals, and of course building on an old humanistic idea, Homo ludens, man the player, so to speak, or playing man.
And by the way, let me just insert that the Evolution Institute just last year held a symposium on play, and that symposium has now resulted in a special issue that just appeared on the American Journal of Play, which is available online. And maybe I could ask Robert to put that information up to accompany our interview here. So play is something which is definitely going to be an interesting thing to integrate along these lines. So anyhow, continue.
Another person who, I mean, the list goes on and on. I'm just thinking off the top of my head of people who approach evolutionary themes in the humanities from different angles. And another one is Lisa Zunschein, which I found for literary, her work, Lisa Zunschein and Brian Boyd, also who is a world-renowned Nabokov scholar, of course. But Lisa Zunschein wrote the book about theory of mind, and it's and how it informs literature, and it is very erudite, and it's a great place to start for anybody who is maybe interested in these topics and from a literary perspective, but isn't quite familiar with some of the themes that are being talked about among evolutionists. But especially theory of mind, because it's been so big for the past couple of decades, and to have somebody sort of take that leap in a literary work and make that connection is really has a